Hey guys, this is James for InBetweenIsode number 4 for myself, and so this is the suave and dapper version of the InBetweenIsode. I'm wearing a tie, and this is literally just because my camera woman, my girlfriend, told me that I should wear a tie for this. So I don't think this is going to become a regular thing because I am no good at tying ties, or I don't have those skills. I gave them up for tea. But for InBetweenIsode number 4, the tie is definitely on. And so today we are drinking a tea that I picked up at the end of Origin Tea's demise, which was one of my favorite vendors, and it is the Ba-Zhong Red Mark tea. And so as some of you guys know, November, the month that we are in now, and when this episode will be airing, the tea of the month for me is Mature Pu'erh. And so this tea from the 1990s is a pretty reasonable example of that. And I'll be honest, when I was buying this tea and others from Tony, kind of when his shop was closing up, I sort of did a haphazard job. I hadn't really explored traditionally stored pu'erh or wetter stored pu'erh at the time, and so it was somewhat, just kind of like, oh, that tea tastes pretty good, I'll go with that. And I didn't have as much experience as I probably do now or in the future at buying these sorts of things. But that being said, I'm extremely pleased with this purchase. Tony sold his tea for very, very reasonably priced, and so yeah, we're just going to give it a go. And so the Red Mark is a very famous recipe from the 1950s, 1960s. Those tend to be the most expensive cakes. You can get those now for, well, I don't even know if you can get them, but they are $40,000 a cake easily for some of those. And so I've given this a couple brews already, just because we're not going to do a whole ton of brews. So we'll take a quick look at the wet leaf at this point. And so you can see that that is extremely dark, and this was a raw pu'erh. And so talking a little bit about mature pu'erh, which is kind of like tea that's reached that really brown state, and that's kind of like what shu pu'erh or ripe pu'erh is trying to imitate. And so, usually they'll refer to teas being stored as being wet or dry. And there's this really, really good blog post by Marshallin that is called Traditional Not Wet, and teas, pu'erhs, have been traditionally stored in a way that tends to be more humid to start out with for a couple years, and then they are then dried out in a much drier conditions. And so that's traditionally how tea is stored. And some people, especially those that sell dry pu'erh, will say that that is considered to be wet stored pu'erh. And they make it sound as if it's something that, this guy just kind of tossed a bunch of tea in his basement. It was just like kind of dank, basement-y, very, very hot and humid. And that's not necessarily the case at all. Traditionally stored pu'erh is kind of a skill in itself, and it's not something that should be dismissed as easily as just being dirty, wet, and moldy. But we are going to give this a go finally. So this is steep number 3 for me. And so usually with these traditionally stored pu'erhs, they're going to get a little bit darker for each steep up until the 3rd or 4th, and then they're going to start to lose steam, and you'll have to add a little bit of time. But for now, we are just going to go right now. And so I'm going to show you guys this liqueur a little bit more closely, but it's brewing up a pretty deep red, and this is not as dark as it could be. Sometimes these pu'erhs will brew up really, really brown or black colors that you could easily see for the more fermented ripe pu'erh. And I'm going to give this one more brew. And I'm going to let this soak for just a few seconds, just because one of the advantages of the Gaiwan is you can have a really clear view of the liqueur color. And so that is brewing up a little bit lighter, actually, a very deep red color, not as dark as the other brew. And so I'm going to have a sip. Cheers, guys. So I would say that these 3rd and 4th steeps are probably right when the tea is hitting its mark. It's sweet. It's still relatively thick and dense. Really smooth, really pleasant to drink. And those are kind of what you're going to look for in a traditionally stored pu'erh or a ripe pu'erh. A couple of the early steeps have a little bit of that funkiness, not a whole lot, but some, and that's pretty typical for some of these pu'erhs. And I would say for you people that don't like that taste, which is also extremely normal, just steep it out. Give it a couple rinses extra if you really find that taste to be so gross. And what you can do, and I'm going to show you guys actually what I do, is you can air it out. And so usually when people would drink these cakes, they would break it up into almost loose form. And so I'm going to show you what I do. So I break off, maybe half an ounce, and then I break it up pretty good, and I put it in this. And so this container is a container I picked up from Daiso, which is a place where it's basically a Japanese dollar store. So these containers are not totally airtight, which is kind of the point. So you want to get kind of these not the greatest containers and expose it to some air for a couple weeks. And that's really a good way to air the tea out and expose it to some air and just let it breathe a little bit, and then that will help to get rid of some of that funk in it. Alright. So a little bit of nuttiness, a little bit of fruitiness. Just extremely pleasant. And I think the biggest asset of this tea was that its price. It was priced at, I think, about $100 to $105 a cake, which is just really reasonable for any tea from the 1990s that is drinkable. Alright, so let's have the fourth brew. So pretty similar, still plenty dense, plenty sweet. This tea, I did find it does lose a little bit of its gusto in the coming up brews, the 5th, 6th, or 7th. These traditionally stored pu'erhs tend to steep out quite a bit longer than ripe pu'erh, for instance. But yeah, so for those that are interested in teas like this, unfortunately this tea is no longer available, but you can definitely look out for teas that say traditionally stored, or some vendors will just call them wetter stored pu'erh. And so try those out, air them out, try them a couple different ways, I would say, for those that haven't liked it yet. Don't necessarily give up unless you've tried absolutely everything. And yeah, thank you guys for watching, and please give any feedback on what you would like to see in these episodes, in terms of camera work, in terms of content, in terms of anything. Yeah, so thank you guys for watching, for paying attention to the Suave and Dapper In-Between-Isode number 4, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.